In February 2022, FIFA made one of the most decisive moves in the history of international sports. They banned an entire country from the World Cup. Not for cheating, not for match fixing, not for corruption inside the federation, for a war. Russia, the same country that had hosted the World Cup just 4 years earlier, was erased from the tournament, from qualifying, from everything. Indefinitely. The world applauded, saw FIFA had finally taken a stand. And then, something interesting happened. To understand what comes next, you need to understand something about FIFA. FIFA is not a government. It's not the United Nations. It's not a court. It's an organization that generates, by its own projections, $13.1 billion in revenue from the 2023-2026 cycle alone. An organization whose president, Gianni Infantino, takes home a pay package that recently hit $6 million per year, including a 33% bonus increase after a particularly profitable tournament. An organization with 201 member nations, more members than the United Nations itself. And like any organization of that size, what drives it, at its core, is a question worth asking carefully. FIFA has a human rights policy, adopted in 2017, enshrined in its guiding principles. It commits to, and this is their language, exercising leverage in connection with adverse human rights impacts. Keep that phrase in mind, because what comes next is a study in how leverage actually gets exercised. The ban came fast. February 28, 2022, 4 days after Russia's invasion of Ukraine began, FIFA and UEFA jointly announced the suspension of all Russian clubs and national teams from international competition. No timeline, no conditions, just banned. The mechanism was straightforward. European nations, Poland, Sweden, England, the Czech Republic, had already declared they would refuse to play Russia. FIFA found itself with a practical problem. You can't run a qualification tournament if teams refuse to show up. The ban, some analysts noted, was as much logistical as it was moral. But the optics were powerful. FIFA had drawn a line. Military aggression equals expulsion. Simple, clean, unprecedented in its speed. Except, as ESPN noted at the time, it wasn't entirely unprecedented in what it didn't do. FIFA didn't ban the United States, the United Kingdom, or Australia when they entered Iraq in 2003 without explicit UN authorization. FIFA didn't sanction Saudi Arabia when it began its military campaign in Yemen in 2015. Some would call that inconsistency. Others call it geopolitics. Others still call it something simpler. And that's where the story gets more interesting. Before we get to Saudi Arabia, you need to understand Qatar, because Qatar is the bridge between what FIFA said it stood for and what it was willing to tolerate. Qatar was awarded the 2022 World Cup in 2010. The decision was immediately controversial. A country of 2.8 million people, with summer temperatures that can reach 50-degree Celsius and virtually no football tradition. What it did have: money, sovereign wealth, an ambition to reshape its global image. Over the following decade, an estimated thousands of migrant workers brought from South Asia and Africa to build the stadiums, the hotels, the infrastructure, died in Qatar. The Guardian documented at least 6,750 deaths of workers from just 5 countries of origin. Official Qatari statistics showed 15,021 non-Qatari deaths between 2010 and 2019 alone, though the causes of many were listed simply as natural causes or cardiac arrest, classifications that made compensation nearly impossible for families. FIFA had a human rights policy, and FIFA had its flagship tournament to protect. On the eve of the 2022 World Cup, President Infantino held a press conference. He declared memorably, "Today I feel Qatari. Today I feel Arab. Today I feel African. Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled. Today I feel a migrant worker." He then turned to Europe and suggested the continent should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before giving moral lessons to anyone. The World Cup went ahead. No compensation fund for workers' families was ever established. Not by FIFA, not by Qatar. The tournament, meanwhile, generated revenue that set records. And that record revenue created an appetite for more. In November 2024, FIFA awarded the 2034 World Cup to Saudi Arabia. Not through a competitive bidding process. The vote at the FIFA Congress was described by critics as having effectively eliminated meaningful competition. Australia, the only other potential bidder, chose not to formally enter after it became clear it lacked the support of the Asian Football Confederation. Saudi Arabia won by acclamation. The kingdom had been building toward this moment for years. Its sovereign wealth fund, the Public Investment Fund, or PIF, had poured billions into sports. Live Golf, Formula One. Cristiano Ronaldo, Neymar, Karim Benzema, all brought to the Saudi Pro League. The spending on LIV Golf alone is estimated to exceed $6 billion by year's end. Critics had a word for it: sports washing. The deliberate use of sports to reshape international perception, to launder a reputation through the universal language of competition. Saudi Arabia's human rights record had been under intense scrutiny for years. The 2018 killing of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul had sent shockwaves through the diplomatic world. The kingdom's treatment of women, of political dissidents, of the LGBTQ+ community, all remained points of sustained international concern. FIFA's own assessment of the 2034 bid rated the risk of human rights issues as medium, with the note that hosting the tournament could help contribute to positive human rights impacts. That's the same language, roughly, that was used before Qatar. And the same outcome, some observers quietly predicted, would likely follow. Here's where the numbers become impossible to ignore. The Club World Cup, held in the United States in 2025 and heavily backed by Saudi money, added approximately $2 billion to FIFA's revenue cycle. Saudi Arabia's PIF was a commercial partner. PIF-owned Surge Sports Investment holds a stake in DAZN, which broadcast the tournament. Earlier this month, May 2026, with the World Cup already underway in North America, Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund officially became an official tournament supporter of the 2026 World Cup. The precise value of that deal was not disclosed. FIFA's revenue from TV broadcasting rights alone exceeded $1 billion in 2025, and Gianni Infantino, who lives in Miami, whose daughter's school fees are reportedly covered by FIFA, received a 33% bonus increase tied directly to the financial success of these tournaments. What this creates is a system where the financial interests of the governing body and the financial interests of certain states become aligned. Not identical, not conspiratorial necessarily, but aligned. When Russia was banned, there was economic cost, but the cost was manageable. The political pressure was overwhelming. The logistical problem was real. When Saudi Arabia writes checks that add billions to FIFA's revenue cycle, that gets the 2034 World Cup, who becomes an official sponsor of 2026. The calculus is different. No war was required. The leverage FIFA promised to exercise in connection with human rights? It's worth asking, who has leverage over whom? Human Rights Watch has been direct. In a 2023 report, the organization stated that FIFA had broken its own human rights rules in the process of awarding the 2030 and 2034 World Cups. Amnesty International called FIFA's handling of Qatar worker deaths an egregious whitewashing of serious abuses. Researchers at The Conversation noted bluntly, "There is very little reason to suspect the FIFA 2034 World Cup will lead to lasting change in Saudi Arabia. Mega events rarely result in lasting human rights improvements." And the pattern they point to is consistent across Russia 2018, Qatar 2022, and now Saudi Arabia 2034. The tournament arrives, the attention follows, then the tournament ends. And the workers, or the dissidents, or the families left behind, remain. What's notable is who doesn't speak. Not many sponsors, not many federations, not many of the 211 member associations that vote at FIFA congresses and receive development money from the Forward program, a program through which FIFA has distributed more than $5 billion since Infantino took power in 2016. Distribution of funds has a way of generating loyalty. The 2026 World Cup, by FIFA's own projections, will generate $13.1 billion in the 2023-2026 revenue cycle. That's TV rights, hospitality, ticket sales, $3 billion from those alone, sponsorship, which is expected to exceed $2.8 billion. And now, Saudi Arabia's undisclosed but symbolically significant supporter deal, signed days ago. The winner of the 2026 World Cup will receive $50 million, the highest payout in the tournament's history. A record-breaking $871 million prize pool will be distributed among the 48 participating nations. These numbers make headlines. They're designed to. They make FIFA's expansion feel like generosity, like inclusion, like the beautiful game becoming more beautiful. But the $13.1 billion doesn't just appear. It's the product of decisions made years earlier, decisions about who hosts, who sponsors, who gets access, and every decision leaves a trail. Russia invaded Ukraine. Ban arrived in 4 days. Saudi Arabia's PIF spent billions across FIFA's ecosystem over several years. The 2034 World Cup was awarded by acclamation. This week, a new sponsorship deal was signed, with the World Cup in progress. The math isn't complicated. What's complicated is deciding what to call it. FIFA was founded in 1904. For most of its history, it was a modest administrative body, a scheduler of international fixtures, a keeper of rules. What it became, over a century, is something more difficult to describe. An empire of soft power, a holder of the world's most watched sporting event, a body capable of banning nations, crowning hosts, reshaping economies, and generating $13 billion in the process. Gianni Infantino has overseen the most financially successful era in FIFA's history. The $14 billion projection for the 2027 to 2030 cycle suggests that era is far from over. Russia remains banned from the 2022 World Cup, from this one, with appeals to the Court of Arbitration for Sport unsuccessful. Saudi Arabia is, as of this week, an official tournament supporter of the World Cup. Russia is banned from attending. FIFA says it can drive positive change in host nations. The evidence from Russia 2018 and Qatar 2022 is, at minimum, complicated. The human rights organizations that track these things are not optimistic about 2034. And somewhere in the gap between what FIFA says and what FIFA does, there's a question that $13 billion makes very difficult to answer clearly. Who exactly is the World Cup for? For the fans who can no longer afford tickets, with some seats reportedly reaching thousands of dollars under FIFA's dynamic pricing model. For the players who compete on fields built by workers who weren't always treated as people. For the nations that host, some of them using the tournament to build something lasting, others to launder something less visible. Or for the system itself, the 211 federations, the television networks, the sponsors, the sovereign wealth funds, the president earning $6 million a year with a 33% bonus increase. FIFA doesn't answer that question directly, but the money, if you follow it carefully enough, answers it for them.